Hey y'all, it's Brody, and today I'm here to discuss the politics of reading with you. So, this was a panel for BookNet Fest 2020. As we are all aware at this point, BookNet Fest 2020 has moved exclusively to online panels because of COVID-19 and, just the world being the world in general. So, what I have decided to do, because I really liked the conversations that sparked out of BookNet Fest last year, and I don't want that to be lost this year just because it's online. So, instead of having those conversations in person, one-on-one, what I want to do is bring them to YouTube. So, for every panel, I will be making a response video of sorts, kind of a what would I say if I were on that panel, what are my opinions, what are my thoughts, what did I take away from the panel. So yeah, this should be a really fun little project. I don't know how long this is going to last. I think through the month of September, maybe into October, but this should be, a fun way to get my thoughts out there and make sure that we're still continuing the conversations that I think are very important and need to be continued. People on this panel were Mari from My Name is Marina, Sam from Thoughts on Tomes, Nicole Sweeney, Deboki from Okie Dokie Boki, and Jocelyn from Yogi with the Book. And in the downstairs, I will be leaving the podcast episode as well as the transcripts for the podcast episode if you are deaf or hard of hearing, or if you have auditory processing issues like me. Thank you for putting the transcript on there. That was very helpful. First question topic is how or why is reading political? And to me, everything is political. When your life is political and living is a political statement, then everything that you do, everything you engage with is political, whether you want it to be or not. In some places of the world, you can be fired, you can be imprisoned, you can be killed for being outwardly queer. There's the whole conversation that's been going on about reproductive rights for people with uteruses, whether they have the right to an abortion or not. There is a constant ongoing debate for some reason over whether cops should be allowed to murder black people. So, in a world where everything is political, including the existence of white people are not excluded from this because as a white person, you have a power. So, it's not just marginalized people, it's all people. As a white person, you have a power politically to help make changes. And if you are choosing to actively ignore those changes, then you are part of the problem. But anyway, we'll get into that later. I am digressing. Yes, reading is political because the existence of every single person on this planet is political. The next topic is how reading has reflected or changed my politics. For me, I feel like it has changed my politics a lot because growing up, I grew up in a very conservative, very Republican, tiny town where there were 18 churches and one stop sign. So paint the picture for yourself, if you will. Lots of pro-Trump stuff, lots of anti-gay stuff, lots of racism, lots of very conservative, narrow-minded, traditional values. I'm using air quotes. And that's the environment that I was raised in. I was raised surrounded by all of these people who think that they should be allowed to shoot black people. I was raised in an environment surrounded by people who thought that I should be murdered for being gay, who would tell me to kill myself for being gay, because at the time I identified as gay and not bisexual. Being surrounded in that had a lot of confusing thoughts, because for me it was I am a Christian and I believe in God, but they're telling me that my sexuality is wrong. But why would God do that? Why would God make me like this if it was wrong? There was also the whole thing where racism was super prevalent and people of color weren't welcome, but we're Native Americans. And I always knew that I stood on the opposing side from where people would come at me with political discussions. I knew you were coming at me with a racist topic. I am standing on the other side of that. But I never really knew how to put it into words until I grew up and I started reading. So I think that reading and getting to see all of these different experiences and hearing all of these different voices and stories and cultures and learning new identities and all of that stuff, it helped expand my worldview. Because like I said, the bubble that I grew up in was very white and straight and conservative. And we didn't have anything other than that in my town. Also, because we were a low income area, we didn't really have great resources, so like there was no local library for me to use to read more from. We didn't have Wi-Fi for a long time growing up because we're out in the middle of nowhere. You can't get service. So now there's the question of how you balance reading critically, like with a critical eye, versus reading for enjoyment. I can do both. It's come to the point where I feel like I have to do both because now I am so much more aware of the content that I consume, where it's like, if it has an all-white cast, I'm not going to watch it. If the only characters of color are background characters with hardly any lines and they're just there to like, you know, I think a really good way to look at this would be like through Riverdale, right? Because a lot of people say that Riverdale's not meant to be taken seriously. It's brain candy. And yet we know that their cast members of color, particularly black actresses, are paid the least out of the entire cast. I believe it was one of the girls who played the Pussycats. I think her name is Aisha Bromfield, who had talked about how she was tired of just being there for like a snappy musical number before commercial, or for someone to like roll her neck in the back of, you know, the scene. She's not there to be that. She's there to act. So noticing that in content that I watched was I think what changed it for me. It wasn't necessarily books, because like I said, as long as I can remember, I've been trying to seek out narratives in books. But I feel like watching movies and TV was really where I can't watch this just for fun anymore. Like I have to acknowledge these things. So I think it's possible to do both. And now that I, am consuming a lot more content because of the world being on, I can't say fire anymore because it's actually on fire. So the next topic is, there was a lot of talk on the panel about empathy and how reading has helped us like deepen our empathy. And, it came up to talk about a book that helped do that for you. On Twitter, I talked about an older book, which is Push by Sapphire. Is it? Right here it is. I talked about this on there. So if you want to read more, a little bit more about my thoughts on this, I will link my Twitter thread down below for you to check out. But for you two, I wanted to talk about a more current read, and that is Other Words for Home by Jasmine Warga. So this follows a family of immigrants as they are trying to escape their, the war in Syria. They're, seeking asylum in America. It deepened my empathy because I had always known about like immigrants and immigration, but until you read from the point of view of one, I didn't know what it was like to come to a different country and have people make fun of you for the way that you talk or the food that you eat or anything like that. It helped deepen the empathy that I already had and say, maybe I need to do more education on this, and maybe I need to read more nonfiction about this. We'll talk about nonfiction a little bit later, but it made me really sit back and say, this is something that you feel so strongly about, and yet you are very ignorant about, and you need to fix that. Some tips on how to take that empathy and turn it into action. Do something. Don't just sit there and say, oh wow, that's so sad for them. Oh wow, Native Americans shouldn't have their land stolen from them. Oh wow, queer people shouldn't be shot for being gay. Oh wow, we shouldn't have autistic children be forced to drink bleach as a cure for their autism. Oh wow, maybe old white men shouldn't be able to dictate what people do with their uteruses. So don't just sit there and say, oh wow, that sucks for you, I'm really sorry. You need to get off your ass and you need to do something. The retweet function, I think, is something that a lot of people don't use the way that they should. Not everything needs your quote tweet on it. Not everything needs your spicy take. Just retweet it. If you see someone with a GoFundMe for a bail fund, retweet it. If you see someone with a crisis card, retweet it. If you see an article that is educating people on, reproductive issues, retweet it. And that's just the bare minimum that you can do, which I understand the bare minimum sometimes is all you can do. For a long time, that was all that I was able to do, was the bare minimum. There will always be someone who will do a lot more than you, but there are a ton of people who will do a lot less than you. And that's just the start. It's also a matter of educating yourself. You need to learn when to step back and let someone else take the mic, and when it's your time to talk. You need to understand that sometimes you just need to boost people's voices. Sometimes You need to read articles instead of fictional narratives. I believe they talked about it on the podcast, but I think it was Justin from Ghost Reader who said that because so many people read about Black lives as fictional, in a fictional sense, rather than reading nonfiction, the deaths of Black people will always feel fictional to them. And that was something that hit really close to home for me, because I feel that's a very true statement. That is 100% true. If you can engage with fiction all day, I engage with fiction most of my day. But until you are reading the facts, the nonfiction facts, and it doesn't have to be books. You don't have to read nonfiction books. Read articles, watch educational videos. Just do something so where you are consuming the real life content rather than the fictional content. This is gross, but how many times do you sit on the toilet a day? You could take the 3.5 minutes that you're in the bathroom sitting on the toilet to read an article, or if you see someone's tweet and you say, oh, that's so sad, you have time to press the button and retweet it. It's the doing something that I feel a lot of people have a problem with. And just do it. Just do something, okay? Just do something. Okay, so now that I've rambled about that for a good 10 minutes, the discussion of being neutral and being objective and your own personal biases and how you see that reflected in the community and in yourself. I said this on Twitter. Being neutral is bullshit. I do not believe in that. This is something I don't understand. It's a standard in our community that says we need to be as objective as possible and we need to be as neutral as possible. And for me, I just don't get it. I mean, I don't want to hear you talk with no passion in your voice about something that you don't really care about, or something that you're scared of getting in trouble for talking about. I want to see you get passionate. I want to see you care. If you show me neutrality, then I am not going to trust you in a political sense. So for me, looking at it in that sense, like, I have to care about something. I have to have an opinion about something to give it a perspective. However, I think it's very important that you can say, I don't know enough about this to speak on this properly. We all want to feel like professionals here, and we all want to feel like we know what we're talking about, but that is not the case with so many things. I can't speak on the experience of an immigrant family coming to America. I can't do that, so I'm not going to comment my opinion on the cultural aspects of this book. I can say I appreciated it being included, I appreciated getting to read about it, but I can't comment on this thing that I will not understand. And I talked about this before. Where is the Only Good Indians? Because we're about to get back into this. I talked about this in another video on my channel, which if you're on my channel, you've probably seen it's my most viewed video. It's called The Mistreatment of Natives on BookTube, that talks about the racism that Native Americans face in the community. In that, I talked about a specific bookstagrammer who had made a review for The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, which is one of my favorite books of all time. But basically, she was commenting on a culture that she did not understand. She could not understand the cultural nuances of. So, for me, being a Native American person, I don't want to hear your opinion on my culture. If you are not Native, I don't give a fuck about your opinion on Native culture. I have seen this sentiment echoed with so many other people throughout the community. I've seen it with so many different people, and it's like, why do we have to keep talking about this? We don't hand the mic over to people enough, and that's something that we definitely, as a whole community, need to work on. Okay, and the last topic of conversation is change or improvement that you want to do personally for yourself. For me, that is reading more nonfiction. I am a hardcore fiction person. I need to read more nonfiction. So I think what I'm going to start doing is every month I'm going to try and read one nonfiction book. I have a couple on my TBR, and I think that will help broaden my worldview even more, because fiction shows you a hyper reality of things. Nonfiction shows you the actual reality of things, and that's something I definitely need to kind of click back in with. Alright, that's all I have for today. If you want to further continue this discussion, I highly encourage you to make a video talking about the politics of reading. This is a video that I've been wanting to make for quite a while, and whenever I found out that it was a BookNet Fest panel, I had already had this idea of making response videos of sorts to continue the discussion. So yeah, I encourage you to make a response video. I encourage you to keep engaging with BookNet Fest across your platforms. I encourage you to participate in the Twitter chats and listen to the podcast or read the transcripts. And I encourage you to make response videos and blog posts, because I think this event does a lot of good for the community, and it brings a lot of good conversations up, and they're conversations that we should keep having, which is what I am aiming for with making these videos. Alright, comment question of the day. Recommend me some good nonfiction. Recommend me your favorite piece of nonfiction that you think I would get something out of, that helped you get something. Because like I said, I want to get more into that world, and I would appreciate your help. Also, booktubers that you know that read a lot of nonfiction or that talk about nonfiction somewhat on their channels, because I feel like 99.9% of the people that I watch only talk about fiction. So if you have any favorites, or if you're a booktuber who talks about nonfiction, then let me know down in the comments so that I can go follow you and start watching your content. And if you don't have time, you don't have the spoons, or you just don't want to answer, then leave me an emoji, preferably a yellow heart, so I know that you made it all the way until the end. Everything I've mentioned today will be in the downstairs, so links to the panelists, places where you can find the panel, the BookNet Fest website, stuff like that, as well as links to all of my social medias if you want to go follow me on there, and places to support me outside of YouTube. So my Instagram, my Goodreads, my Twitter, my Amazon wishlist, my Ko-fi, my PayPal, if you want to, you know, spot me some dollars. Alright, I hope you have a wonderful, whatever it is, wherever you are. I will see you next time with another video. Thank you for watching. Okay, cool. Bye. I'm almost out of storage space.